Okay, this is a really great chapter, and I actually am really excited because you're gonna think this is one for the movies, but again, there's something it's hidden in it. So it says you should take of the first of all the fruit of the land. So who should give the first fruit, the bikurim? Who are you going to give it to? So you're giving it to God, and the most beautiful of your, the house, of your fruit, of anything you're doing, it's always going to be first to God. And I was thinking nowadays, since we're not living in Israel and we can't even understand this, what could we really pledge to God? And I was thinking of character. If, we pledge our character in certain things, for example, prayer, it's beautiful to have prayer, but now sometimes we just rattling off words because it's in a different language and we're like, kind of got to get through the day. And so what I started doing personally is in the morning, you have to get into the mood. So, you got to get the feelings going, the right feelings. And that is through, I try to learn Tanya, or just think of, maybe read a beautiful Jewish story, or, think of a discussion maybe you had, or something that you had on Rosh Hashanah, something that's special, that can motivate you, that when you're praying, you're thinking of, okay, Hashem, I'm having a conversation with you. What do I want to work on for this month? And it could be little small steps. But again, it's always you're giving God the first of you, the best of you. So I thought that would be a great idea. Also, attitude. Sometimes a person could be like, thinking negative. But if we say, well, if God's in charge of everything, especially and it's just a lot of things that you appreciate about life. I was thinking, well, we could just appreciate the fact that we have a house. Like back then, they didn't have any house whatsoever. Some of them were sleeping in the synagogue because they had nowhere to really go. So it was, I can't even imagine. Like they had wood piece, and the woman would take the embers back to their house. I'm thinking, God, thank God I have, I'm here, I'm complaining. So that, sometimes if the air conditioner's not working, we're all like, what happened? Air conditioning, but so we get like this. So that was from Rambam. And it brings up another point. It says, the choicest to God. There's another part of the portion. And I thought, what's really powerful is I always like to use my first head in the morning for Torah. And there is something that the Lubavitcher Rebbe says about this concept, that your first mind in the morning should be, it doesn't have to be a big mind, but it should be for Torah learning, for something special, whether you're reciting Psalms or thinking a godly thought, or a little 5-minute meditation. It's really powerful for you in the morning because then it kind of just sets your day. My kids, I always say, even though sometimes, like on Thursdays, the rabbi can't always do a full morning thing on Thursdays. Usually he does a long time at the end of the week, and I always do in the afternoon. So this week I love to do secular, but I know I can't start in the morning. I got to give them their Torah time, even though it's just convenient for me to say, okay, this is your assignment, let's do it, let's go. But I know that when I set them right in the morning, there's this cute cartoon called Shazak. It's an app that the kids have to watch, and it helps them. So that's what I'll give them, and other kids could have other, they have different stuff that they do. But that's the whole idea of God comes first, even if it's not always convenient sometimes. So it also talks about this. It says, an Armenian nomad was my father. So it just sounds like, okay, what are we talking about here? Because sometimes Torah sounds so poetic, we think that, it just slides over us. We don't really always think of what it's talking about. But it's referring to the phrase of Arami Ovid Abi. And that translates, the Armenian sought to destroy my father. And this is referring to that Lavan, he's the, Laban, he's the Armenian, and he attempts to harm Jacob. So the first thing, what did he do? He got involved in the marriage. It's a big deal if you get married to the wrong woman. he got involved where in like the worst situation you can do. He definitely got involved in that. And also that he tried to ruin Yaakov. And he said, oh, I'll just have my daughters and my flock, as if he's going to just take him out of the picture. And that has a huge impact because he's basically saying, I want to influence, I want to manipulate them to serving idols. And you in the picture, it doesn't work. So obviously he didn't understand his daughters were never going to go for that, and it would never work. God is always watching. But it's something that shows, again, his power, that it wasn't like, they say, even in the book of Genesis, it talks about that he was even worse than Pharaoh, because Pharaoh wanted to get rid of the Jewish boys. He wanted to get rid of both. He's like, let's just stop this religion completely. So again, he was a very tricky guy. And but at the end, obviously, Yaakov did end up succeeding. He was even supposed to be poisoned by Lavan's father, this funeral. And it was like, well, what's going on? And the simple commentator said, Rashi says, oh, it's because Basuel, the father, tried to poison him. Even started before Yaakov, with Rivka, not to poison her, but to poison Eliezer, the servant. And so it was a whole thing, like they were just not a good family. But you see what comes from even a family that might not look good, right? We see Rivka, we see Rachel and Leah, where their father was tricky and not good as well. But they were these incredible people. So it always gives people hope that even if you come from not a good family, God forbid, you always have a chance. So, and also the idea of respect, of how, be careful. Oh, I was thinking so we see how Lavan was so tricky, and he's trying to get involved, and and I was thinking of a mother-in-law. And I found this funniest clip, I forgot what it was called, of this mother-in-law, it was a comedy, a joke, and she is trying to be the sweet, typical Jewish mother-in-law, and she interferes in everything with this kid. I mean, it's just obviously a joke. And I was thinking, with mother-in-laws or mothers or whatever it is, sometimes we have to take a step back, and it's good. And I have to tell myself that every minute of the day, sometimes with certain things, especially when it comes to what we call the Hanhala, the people in charge. When my son is going, I always say I have to be so careful that, that I know my place. I remember how I'm supposed to come off. So I have to double check myself at least 15 times, maybe 50, maybe 100, so that I'm doing, I'm acting right. What am I saying to my son? Am I giving him this positive energy? Am I taking everything he says so seriously? And it goes with every step when it comes to mothering or a mother-in-law. So, and I realize that that's really, I guess, our love on within, in a way, that we can just step back and say, okay, we don't have to always have, what we think is always right. We have to sometimes double check ourselves. So another thing in the Torah which I felt would be a good idea. It talks about that don't forget the stranger, you and the Levite and the stranger, that you should be careful not to just neglect them, ignore them. This is really a powerful thing to help people when we can, because it's not a mitzvah just to, stuff ourselves. We're meant to help others as well. And that comes from the Mishnah Torah, the laws of festivals. So I just thought that was really another beautiful thing. So the stranger here is Jewish, but even someone who is, not of our faith or not of our whatever, everyone is special. There's laws to help everybody. And so someone's coming, and I think we see this again when it comes to the laws of servants, or we could call them employees, but back then they were called servants. If you're having a servant, you have to make sure that they have a bed before you do. So, and that refers to any servant. People have to be respected. They have to have, they were even able to get married, and you have to make sure they have what they need. So that's our job as, when we can, we're meant to help others. We're meant to look out for other people. not to make it impossible for ourselves, but it's always good to give charity, and there's many different ways of giving charity. So absolutely, I would say that absolutely. So then it brings another quote that just seems, again, something that we might not think about. You have chosen God this day to be your God, and God has chosen you this day to be a people for his own possession. And the story that is brought that I found that was really a nice, beautiful story, and the Yalkut Shimoni talk about, I think he was a ger, I'm not sure, I have to find out, but talk about people that, we're supposed to be helping. So Miriam, the daughter of Tanhum, was taken into captivity, and she and her 7 sons, and back then it was very simple. They wanted to break the spirit of the people. So you want to get past, no one should bother you, say you're converting to their religion, say you're bowing down to idols, you get in. You're okay, you're free to go. But she taught her kids, we don't bow to the idols. So, and each of her sons, this king would say to her, tell your son to bow to the idols, to take up on our religion, and he's free to go. Even if it's just lip service, he's free to go. Because everyone was watching and it was a big deal, so she prepares all of her sons. She had 7 of them. I don't have no idea how she did it. 7 sons to do this. And they all were killed. Even her littlest son, it says that he was only 2 years old. And the king said, listen, I'm going to drop this little jewel, my ring. You'll pick it up. It will look like you bowed, but you're just picking up the ring. And he said, no. And they killed all of her kids. And so when I hear this story, I'm like, you're probably thinking, why do we bring this up? But there are stories. These are our stories of faith. It reminds us again, that there is something stronger than just being, we're the Jewish people. And, we always think of all these sad stories and sometimes happy stories. But a lot of these stories remind us that God promised us he will take us out of exile. We will have a temple again. We are, special. Even if these things happen, we're not alone. And I think that when we hear these stories, it's on one hand, it's very sad. On the other hand, it gives us this fire, this strength, wow, that's powerful. That's beyond just the body. That's beyond just, being a regular person. That's what we're talking about, soul here. So that's what I felt was really a powerful story. If it's in private, you're allowed to say lip service. And if it's in public, you're not allowed to. Because when it comes to public presence, it's much more 3 things that a person has to risk their life, and one of them is idol worship. I think it's referring to in public. So I guess we'll end off on 2 good notes. A beautiful point that you can't outrun is a blessing. So if you earned a blessing, God is running after you with the blessing. The angels are sticking the blessing on you and say, here you go, here's the blessing. You can't get away from it. And that's what this beautiful verse tells us. Also, a person should remember not to be a tzaddik in a fur coat. And that's referring to that if you're a wonderful person, and you earned spiritually, you earned all of this beautiful stuff, don't forget to go outside your fur coat and help others, whoever can earn your help. If someone else needs help in any way, be there for them. That's why you're a tzaddik. Be there for them. So the last one was always a very special story about the Alter Rebbe, and it was on the birthday. They had this great birthday, the 2 rabbis yesterday. And his greatest thing, the Alter Rebbe, is he made everything seem so positive. Even when he was reading the curses, it says that his son would listen to his father saying all the curses. He was fine every year. And one year his father didn't read it. He got so deathly ill, he almost died because he was a very sick child, and it just affected his soul so much he couldn't even handle it. He was bedridden. So at some point, someone asked him, what's the difference? We say it every year. He says, yeah, but when this rabbi said it, I understood what the curses meant. He said, when my father says it, the Alter Rebbe, he just kind of goes over it in a way where you feel like everything, oh, well, if you just do this, it'll be fine. And if you just do that, it'll be fine. It was like a positive approach even when it was saying the curses. Because, if you do the opposite of that, you're going to be blessed. So I guess you can say that's a beautiful ending. It also talks about the last part, that if you do a sin with happiness and gladness, then you shall serve your enemies. And this is referring to, of course, that if you're happy about doing the wrong thing, it's a terrible punishment. And I was thinking to myself, okay, how can we make that a positive? So, yes, if a person does a mistake, it's not on the same level as it was back then, because we don't really understand the level of certain sins. For example, idol worship. No one can even understand that. But what we can do is always realize that God, if it's about the relationship, if it's about the connection with God, then if you have a spouse, a husband and a wife, sometimes if a person did a huge mistake, right? God forbid, someone did a huge mistake, there is hope if a person comes back a changed person and says, listen, I want the relationship to work. I want the connection to work. I want to fix this. How can I do that? For real. Make a list for me. I'm here. And we know that Hashem already set certain things up. Repentance, you can give charity, you can work on that part of that character. If a person was angry and did something wrong, then he can work on his anger. If a person it was selfish and didn't care about others, he can just change that by that famous story of that boy. He would go when he was what was it? I think it was the Friedrich Weber, or maybe it was his father. I think it was maybe his father. And this boy came to yeshiva, but he was very full of himself. And they wanted to accept him in the most greatest yeshivas, Tamchei Tamim. But they said, look, this boy, he's so full of himself. He can't, it's not a good thing to have him here. And so the Rebbe said, you know what? He's going to serve the boys. He's going to serve them. And so he would go and he would serve their tables or whatever it is that they needed. There's a lot of helping in the kitchen or whatever it was. By the time he was done, the following year when he came back, to see the Rebbe, it was a different face. It was a refined character, understanding how to help others. When you say, how can I help you? You're giving of yourself. And so that's another way of reflection and working on a particular character trait. So I would say that to somebody who feels that they perhaps can't help out when they did something maybe terribly wrong, or they feel is really wrong in God's eyes. There's always something, hopefully, that can be done. So, like I said, it was a beautiful chapter.